Good morning, watchers. Welcome to Brother Sal's Sunday Gathering at the Storehouse. We're so happy to have you here once again. We're very pleased to be here ourselves. Well, Tony's back in California and sitting right next to me, so we're going to have a really great conversation. First, I want to welcome him back and welcome to the show, Tone.
Thanks, Dad. Thanks for having me.
And I know from the pictures and all the conversation, you had a wonderful time doing your mission over in Budapest.
Well, it wasn't much of a mission, but it was nice to be able to keep doing the show and enjoy someplace that I'd never seen before.
Well, today, I think it's time for the folks who've been listening to us for quite a while, get some of the dots connected as to how everything that's happening in history right now and Scripture are all just really totally linked together. So, Tony, I know you've been studying real hard all week long and checking out everything you could. So why don't you tell us how the dots get connected?
Okay, Dad. Well, the thing that's dawned on me this week is all of the different predictions that are coming together on the stage of history from not only the biblical prophecies, but also the insights from the historians, let's say, like Professor Quigley, and from others like William Guy Carr, who wrote in 1958 the book Pawns in the Game, in which he describes being privy or quoting a letter from a book that he'd seen about these predicted world wars and the circumstances. So Predicting World War, I think, is the show title of the one where we sort of went over all that, if anyone's interested. But I've been looking at it from the synthesis of these different relationships and how to gauge where we are in the world today and what to be looking for, because that's the original purpose of the show, and the Daniel's glasses and the watch all these years has been the idea that there's something to watch for, and we know where we're looking to see it, and we're watching these things happen in history that are revealing this deeper understanding that we could only know we were understanding because we were seeing the things happening that we predicted. And so all the way back in 2015 with the meeting of the kings of the Arab nations to decide what to do with Israel, 3 of them said we don't want to go along with this roadmap to peace. So I keep reflecting on this idea, this roadmap to peace, and how that fits in with the way, everything is black is white. Everything's a deception. When, freedom and liberty mean just the opposite. If they call something the America's Freedom Act or Patriot Act, it's got nothing to do with patriotism. When they say this is the, good for business, this is good for the little man, well, it's proven it hasn't been. So everything comes at us that way. So this roadmap to peace has resulted in nothing but war. Since, that it was in 2000 that they met, and a year later, boom, the Twin Towers, like it was all to a schedule. If you look at it, again, trying to integrate these different visions that have come out of our study, and not just pretend you're going to reconcile it with the New York Times version. And these people who, the more I see it, the more ISIS looks like Hollywood. And so we've been talking this week, what could that mean, except that they are the name given to the force that's taking back that territory from someone for something. I mean, that's what it comes down to. What are they doing? What is ISIS? Why are there armed people? What are bombs being dropped? Where are they being dropped, and why? And when you look at the fact that arms dealers are straining to keep up with the bombs that they're dropping, and we don't see any pictures of it, could it be that they're stockpiling bombs over there, or could it be that they're bombing things they don't want us to see? I don't think it could be that many bombs going off without people getting some sort of pictures of them somehow. So I really think it's all quite a Hollywood effort right now, and they're stockpiling the weapons over there. But for what? And what is the purpose of all this? How do we connect the dots of what we know is going on or see is going on and what they tell us is going on with these things that have been predicted all the way through to the prophecies, and also in light of what we've been expecting all these years and watching come to pass, and that is this spirit of Antichrist, this false Messiah. Not an anti-Christian force in the world, a false Messiah of the Jews, and what's got to happen in the world for that to come about. And I believe that's the thing that's going to throw everybody off, because it's easy to see the wars that need to be fought within all these predictions. You have 3 predicted world wars, if that's got any genuine merit. At least it was written in 1958 in William Guy Carr's book, so the fact that in 58 they already knew this final war was going to come from fomenting the Israeli-Arab conflict, right? They just got back in that land, 10 years earlier. And so, that's quite a stretch just to claim already when what we lived through in our lifetime was the threat of communism. If we're to believe the surface level story, it's the communists that almost brought us to the brink of nuclear war and such. And now we're being told that it's the Russians who have all the weapons in World War III. And yet this prediction always said that they would foment the agents, of both Israel and the Muslim world and make it a fight between Islam and Israel to wipe each other out. And perhaps they were thinking about the prophecies within each of those religions that would justify such a thing, because they expect this Armageddon is coming. So it's, anyone who had been studying, as many people had through all the centuries, the scriptures is one of the few pieces of literature that was available to even read for many hundreds of years, and so that's why people knew the scriptures, and people like Sir Isaac Newton and stuff were so interested in prophecy, because they were smart enough to see what it was purporting to say and how accurate it seemed to have been over history, that you needed to pay attention to it. So the fact that here we are in this time when it in fact turns out to be Israel and Islam that are threatening to annihilate each other over there, and always have been now, for the last, since Iran, the whole Iran thing, and we know that our hands were deep into that, meaning the American allies' hands, as they've been in that whole region. Saudi Arabia, come on, King of Jordan, all these people go back to the liberation of that land, so-called, from the Ottomans at the end of World War I. And since then it's been constant Western influence over there, so it's hard to believe they have a whole lot of autonomy and freedom. So anyway, Dad, what I think is, what I've been reflecting on is how it's very easy to connect the dots of the wars that need to happen. By Professor Quigley's view in 1966, it was because these rich people that owned everything had such control by then that they had a plan to control the world and bring it all under economic and political and social control. And so is it just a coincidence that every country has a parliamentary system, that every country has the same sort of education that produces the same sort of dumbed down people with the same sort of political system that all the people know are liars, and the working class gets nothing, and the cities keep getting built in spite of all the same things that happen in the West happen everywhere in the world, essentially. And you can track that money. There is no other money source. There is no other money to fund these, the Bank of International Settlements and the central banks of the world that have been loaning money to the world. all these years. I mean, they're the ones that have all the money. So back in Quigley's time, they had all the money. And he was saying that they have a plan, an intention to rule the world like Rome did. And so is it just coincidence that we see this sort of world where the resources are coveted by this group of bankers to the point where, yeah, all these countries are infiltrated and can be proven to be so since the 40s and 50s in Central America and South America, and then into the 50s and 60s in Indochina, and then up into from the 60s all the way through today in the Middle East. I mean, come on. That's just too clean. These lines are too clean to try and, get around them. So, so what I thought today would be interesting, Dad, is to look at some of the biblical prophecy and the way it's also fitting in, to take another look at it after all these years. Because, what do we expect to happen? What do I think is going to happen over there? I feel pretty sure that when you read Daniel about the three horns that have to be uprooted to make way for this little horn kingdom that comes out of the fourth, the four horns that break down from the one great horn. And I'm starting to see also the way these kingdoms can be, Rome can be considered the last kingdom on that land. It's never changed. They've been funding everything. That's why they're the beast, in the sense that people have always seen them, the Catholic Church and all that. The reason that's the beast is because that outgrowth of the Roman power, where that money went, right, is still ruling that land. It's still coming out of the fourth horn of that Seleucid Empire is where that final horn will rise. Because those empires have never died, right? Those people that were in power through that fourth Roman iron, that's why the iron legs turn into the iron.
Don't forget, it broke into parts from the prophecy.
Yeah, but that's not the point. The point is it stems back to the same empire. It's the same empire representing as a Muslim empire, right? Yes. But it was funded by the same Roman, not the Roman Empire in time, the Roman Empire in reality of authority.
Yes.
That authority never left the scene. That was the final authority on the scene. After Grecia came this Roman beast, that beast, and there's been no other since then. And
sure, because the kingdom, even like the kingdom of heaven, refers to the rulership. So this final kingdom, or this kingdom before the final kingdom, is the rulership, the power.
That's right, and that's why there'll be four. There won't be another one. This Muslim empire isn't ruling in the way that the Roman Empire ruled and never did. It was a outgrowth of that Roman Empire, like the vision of Nebuchadnezzar shows. Mm-hmm. Iron legs to iron and clay feet. Mm-hmm. So the iron's been sort of incorporated into something else, but it's still the iron all the way out to the toes. Mm-hmm. And it's that. So that's why, in my vision, it can fit now with the idea that there are only four beasts. But that doesn't mean the false deliverer has to come out of Rome or Europe, because this is still the Roman Empire all over that land. And it's that part of the land that was designated out of the image of Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon. And that's why this fourth beast was diverse from all the others, right? So anyway, but that's just a aside to what I think is important today. I wanted to point out that from Daniel 8:24, and this is where I want to tie this into the events going on in history right now that we're watching. But in Daniel 8:24, where he's had a vision of this he-goat and ram, and the goat runs into the ram and kills it, and then the great horn of the goat is broken and four rise up for it. And then the angel interprets it for him. verse 22, and as for the horn that was broken, and there rose 4 others under it, 4 kings shall rise up out of the nation, but not by their own power. And at the latter end of their kingdom, see, at the latter end, and that's what I want to get to today, is all the verses I found that refer to the end. So we know that whatever else it says about history, and whatever other overlays people have in their interpretation to pretend that Daniel's already happened, there's a recurring theme about the end in it that I don't think can be ignored. And at the latter end of their kingdom, when the transgressions are come to an end, a king of fierce countenance who understands riddles shall arise, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall cause terrible destruction, and shall prosper, and cross over, and destroy the mighty and the holy people. And through his craft and treachery his dominion shall prosper, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and suddenly he shall destroy many. And he shall also rise up against the prince of princes, but he shall be defeated easily. So that's one of the clues. He shall also rise up against the prince of princes. So if you're a Christian anyway, you got to know that that's Jesus, the true Messiah. So this is a picture of that little horn that rises up in the end. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. Okay, so he's not America or Russia. He's not mighty by his own power. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. I mean, think how interesting all these little clues really are. Who's mighty but not by their own power? Well, somebody that's backed by somebody powerful, right? If we said Hawaii was going to rule the world, and we put our guns behind them, the little nation of Hawaii, so his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall cause terrible destruction, and shall prosper, and cross over, and destroy the mighty and the holy people. Cross over, that's an interesting way when we're expecting him to be both Messiah and Caliph, if not Mahdi, to the people. He's not the real Mahdi now that I've learned what their scriptures say, but he could be the false Mahdi in the same way
that
he's the false deliverer of the Jews.
Only because, and that can only come because the true Muslims know that Jesus, the son of Mary, is the true Messiah of the Jews.
Which is how these only Jews, this remnant that's going to be saved in the end and give their life, have to be the ones that listen to these people that come out of the graves, which I've got in these scriptures today, because that's included in this crazy watch for where do we go from here. The wars are easy. I'm going to tell you about all the wars that are coming, but I want to lay the foundation real quick with the different scriptures that they fit into as well. So that's Daniel 8, basically 24 and 25, about this little king that'll come out of the area, these 4 kings, these kingdoms that took the place of Alexander the Great when his horn broke. Seleucus and Ptolemy, and the other 2 escape my attention at the moment, but Ptolemy being the king of the south later in this chapters 10 and 11, where Daniel details the way these 2 kingdoms would be at war with each other. The Assyrian kingdom to the north, and that's the king of the north. See, that's the territory we're still talking about, people, in today's world. Syria and Jordan and Iraq and Lebanon. This is the old Assyrian Empire, and Israel. At least the northern part of it, down to Jerusalem, because they took Jerusalem 800 years before Christ. And so, this is the territory now. Now, think of this. Let me jump into the modern day and think of this clue, that since the First World War ended and the Hashemites of the time helped the English defeat the Ottomans, they were promised the caliphate, which includes Syria and Iraq and Jordan and Lebanon, right? This is what they were promised as their reward. and they were in charge of Iraq, essentially, when they were murdered, right? His grandfather.
Well, they had moved them when they double-crossed them after the 28 days that they had their caliphate. They were forming it in Syria, in Damascus. They spring the Sykes-Picot on them, and they transfer that king. They break it up, say we can't do it. They take that king, which was the Hashemite king, Faisal, and they move him to Iraq, and they make him king of that area, which is now known as Iraq. You see, and so his family is there, and now his brother Abdullah I, he was the warrior who commanded the army that did the deed with Lawrence from England, Lawrence of Arabia. That was the group he worked with. They broke that Hijaz railway right there and defeated the Ottomans. The English defeated the Ottomans because of it. They were just double-crossing him.
But
So,
the point is, they gave him Iraq, and then
they gave him Jordan.
Yeah, but after but I'm trying to get to the point where then the family's assassinated, and they take that territory from them. The point is, the ones that were left wound up with what they call Transjordan, which is Jordan of today.
Yes.
But the oil-rich region that could have made that family great and brought their caliphate together as they wanted was taken from them, and their family murdered. I'm trying to get to the real bones of what I'm talking about, and why this modern king of Jordan wants England to make good on its promise and give them back their Hashemite king. That's the story on the surface. See, that's the play going on, that he's already been asking for it. His father was the peacemaker who made peace with Israel first, and declared himself a moderate and an ally to the Israel and the West and such. And it's all been, you can see in history now, a play to finally get that territory back under their control. And so now it's on their website, and several years ago he put that big flag up, that huge flag in Aqaba, and he's the one that stood up and claimed, I'm the rightful leader of Islam, I speak.
And that was the revolutionary flag that he put up.
That's right, and that's the one they've printed now for themselves. So when you look at what's quietly going on that they don't report in Jordan, is that the new Hashemite king 100 years later is claiming that he wants the territory that they originally were promised back, and he's the rightful ruler. This ISIS Baghdadi also happens to claim to be a Hashemite descendant, and that he's the rightful. Is this a good cop, bad cop thing? Is this classic drama? Or what? Because it just so happens that Baghdadi is the bad Sunni king, but also a Hashemite king, so that they both have claim to be descended from Muhammad, and that's what the Sunnis believe in, that the leader has to be descended from Muhammad, where the Shia don't, and that's why they have different ideas of who should be leader. And but so now, is that just a coincidence that he's now the good Sunni leader that's done this with the flag, that has this on the website, that raised in English schools with an American wife, and this guy's the
Navy SEAL equivalent.
Well, and then I'm going to get to this now. This is where the hook for me that comes in. I'm just trying to I want to jump back and forth for people who are wanting to see the reality of today and not just hear all the traditions of Scripture. Because most of those are wrong. But there is something in there that has to be figured out, because the prophecies of Daniel have been too accurate, just like someone like Nostradamus. He's been too accurate to just ignore. And so Daniel says that this small horn's going to rise and be mighty, but not in his own power, and he's going to cause terrible destruction. And because his dominion prospers, he magnifies himself in his heart. He starts thinking, boy, I am really the Mahdi. I am really great. And it says in my scripture, and suddenly he shall destroy many. And he'll also rise up against the Prince of Princes but he shall be defeated easily. So, that's part of the Christian story. Now go to the next chapter, in chapter 9, where he's talking about the 70 weeks of years, which is, what everybody's, since Isaac Newton's been trying to figure out, because that's an actual time clock. And so I just want to go to the last couple of verses, the 26th verse, where it says after 62. My Bible says 7 weeks, which is an interesting translation. What I've learned over the years is quite commonly understood to mean weeks of years. 7, that a week is 7 years. But this translation, which is odd to me, after the 2 Bibles I've had, says 7 weeks, which, as I understand, means 1 week, 7 years. But anyway, you'll hear the way it says. After 62 times 7 weeks, Messiah shall be slain, and the city shall be without a ruler, and the holy city shall be destroyed together with the coming king. And the end thereof shall be a mass exile, and at the end of the war, desolations are determined. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 7 weeks, and half a 7 weeks, then he shall cause the sacrifice and gift offerings to cease, and upon the horns of the altar the abomination of desolation, and the desolation shall continue until the end of the appointed time. The city shall remain desolate. So again, it sounds like, for me, a picture of the very end, and the outline that, as we've mostly understood it in Daniel, that what it says is after 69 of the seven-year periods, the Messiah will be cut off. After 62 times 7 weeks, Messiah shall be slain, and the city shall be without a ruler, and the holy city shall be destroyed together with the coming king. Okay, the way this Bible says it. Now we've always
this already explained the 7 weeks, and so at the end of that 7 weeks.
Well, I just didn't read the. I'm saying anybody.
So that's why 62 weeks are left. Yeah.
That's right. Anybody that knows Daniel knows. Let's just say he's talking about the end of the 69. I'm just picking it up there. Yeah. At the end of the 69-year period, that Messiah will be slain, and the holy city without a ruler. In the Bibles I've always had, it says Messiah the Prince, yeah. And the people of the Prince that shall come shall destroy the city. So same thing here, it says, and the holy city shall be destroyed together with the coming king, and the end thereof shall be a mass exile, which we know that the children of Edom and Moab and the remnant of Ammon will be saved. So that appears to be this mass exile, and that the end of the war, desolations are determined. So this isn't going to end in victory, it's ending in desolations. But this shows us that the holy city shall be destroyed, is where I want to go with it today, in the context of where we are in the world today. The holy city shall be destroyed together with the coming king. It's just pointed out that Messiah the king is going to be cut off after 69 weeks. Remember, he's given us 70-week prophecy. I'm telling you, 70 weeks are determined upon you guys, and it's determined all the way to finish the transgressions, to make an end to sins, and for the forgiveness of the iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to fulfill the vision of the prophets, and to give the most holy to Messiah. That's the way mine reads.
The most holy place.
To give the most holy to Messiah. I like the way this reads, because that's the issue, people. What brings the wrath in the end? Claiming a different Messiah. Your son that died wasn't our Messiah. He was a bastard and a liar. We had the right to kill him. We found our Messiah that we're going to claim for our state of Israel here in Jerusalem on your holy mountain. This is the guy that we're going to worship in the temple that he's allowed us to rebuild. See? That's what brings this end. So that's the king that's being spoken of, their king, the holy, and so let me just say it one more time in that context. After 62 times 7 weeks, Messiah shall be slain, and the city shall be without a ruler, and the holy city shall be destroyed together with the coming king. The holy city shall be destroyed together with the coming king. So both the coming king is going to get destroyed. Messiah is going to be slain, and a coming king is going to come, but the city is going to get destroyed. I mean, that's quite a, think of that in the idea of what that's really prophesying. Okay, so that's Daniel 9. Then in Daniel 11, which, there's a lot of debate through there as to whether, a lot of this I've read even in my Ryrie Bible, where it seems to show the accurate history of these things having happened in history. So I want to jump forward to the part that I don't think has happened in history yet, that we can know of. From the 40th verse of Daniel 11, it says, and at the time of the end, at the time of the end, which is quite a clear sort of storyline in Scripture. What the time, they asked Jesus, what's the sign of the time of the end? Apparently there's something to that phraseology. And at the time of the end, the king of the south shall fight against him, and the king of the north shall march against him with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships, and he shall invade the land. And he shall reach also the land of Israel, and many people shall be slain. But these shall be delivered out of his hands, even Edom and Moab and the remnant of the children of Ammon. He shall stretch forth his hand also against other countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape from his hands. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be his allies. See? So why did Muammar Gaddafi have to go? Why has there been so much trouble nobody hears about in Ethiopia? Because, there's a lot. That's where the Jews really went. There's a lot of connection there to kill. That's why you don't hear nothing of Ethiopia. So anyway, that's just
after him once before during the time of Mussolini, because that was Mussolini's big deal to go, kill the king down there.
I'm telling you, but in our modern day, nobody wants people to really realize that. That's a genocide that's been quietly going on forever. But that's a different issue. So for today, we know that they've gotten, I'm just saying, let's let that play into our idea of what's going on today in these wars that I see coming and how it's going to play out. Because what he's saying is that, and this to me just corresponds with what we read about a mass exile accompanying this fall of Jerusalem. Because it says right here, he shall reach also the land of Israel, and many people shall be slain, but these shall be delivered. So there's going to be fighting going on in Israel, and many people slain. We just read about sudden destruction that he's going to bring, even to go against the Prince of Princes, the real Messiah at some point. And then so he's going to take over Egypt, right? That's why Mubarak had to go. Arab Spring, right? All that area without a leader. All in turmoil, run by gangs and cartel. I can just only imagine the horrible stuff. That's what we bring. Look at what we bring to the world. History is quite clear what the places that have some sort of social net, social structure that keeps the whole thing doing whatever they do. When we go in there, we disrupt that completely, and we leave a worse case behind in every case. South America, Central America, Korea, Vietnam.
But in the scheme of the big picture, though, we're just an agent of those.
Yeah, but my point is simply that you know that wherever we go, we're leaving destruction behind. That's just what we do. And so...
it's our function.
Yeah, this is how, back to now Professor Quigley's vision. Yeah. This is his vision of the world now. That I'm just trying to observe the insight of knowing that all this media is propaganda lies, and what is the truth? What's really going on? Why do they all wear ties and play to the same music, even though that music keeps hurting their people? It does wind up putting all the weapons manufacturers in charge of the world. It does wind up putting all the central bankers in charge of the world. It does wind up with all the resources of the world in a smaller and smaller group of these same people, the same net of people seem to be, so is that just a coincidence? Carol Quigley says no. I'm just looking at it with an open mind saying, maybe old Quigley had, was talking about something here with these people that
he
are.
was their secretary, so.
Well, whatever. He was,
Historian.
you can check him out and his potential motives and such, and there's a reason his book's not on the shelf for everybody to see. But the point I'm making is, in our watch of the world today, Dad, somebody in the end, this king of the north, whoever this is going to result in taking over Egypt with Libya and Ethiopia as ally, and also taking over Israel, or fighting against Israel at some point, with these Edom and Moab and the children of Ammon having to flee. So that's what we've got so far going on. And then it opens with the 12th chapter of Daniel, talking about, and at that time shall Michael arise, the great angel who has charge over your people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never has been like it since the beginning of the world. And at that very time, some of your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name should be found written in the book. And for Christians, if you don't take the Bible study, or people who imagine I think that means everybody else is going to hell, then you don't know me. This is a particular book of which those Jews that are going to accept their Messiah are written in. And he's going to save them from this. But this is the part, the second verse now. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Not torment, not fire. I don't know what contempt exactly means, but the word is not Gehenna. Right? That's not the word that or even Sheol. He used shame and contempt. So interesting for Christians out there sending everybody to hell. But anyway, I want to just dwell on this for a second, Dad. There shall be a time of trouble such as never been like it since the beginning of the world. Now, that Nostradamus seems to, if you want to bring it all the way up from 2,600 years ago at Daniel to just a few hundred years ago at Nostradamus, he sees the same kind of thing with all the natural disasters, the floods, the wars, right? He sees all that. Hopi Indians see it. I mean, come on. Prophecy seems to be, on a certain target.
This is kind of almost the official, the word coming from God, that all of these people have received and see it in their way.
Well, I'm only suggesting that it fits a certain forensic pattern of the evidence that we have. Yeah. I mean, it just seems kind of odd that the Muslims also know Jesus is the true Messiah, that Jesus came from a virgin, that Jesus will come again. It's the only thing different is they feel they got a prophet to themselves.
Right.
So can I not incorporate that into the God that I could believe might exist?
Especially since you know that he raised Pharaoh up for his own purpose.
Well, yeah, that's again. People should check out the Bible study, because we'll start pulling too many strings here. I want to get to what this means in the world today. But I want to point out here that what it says in Daniel, and it's talking about at that time, which we also know is this end time period, because verse 4, I didn't get to finish the last couple of verses here of the 11th chapter, but he shall prosper over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and Ethiopians shall be his allies. But rumors from the east and from the north shall trouble him. Sounds like Turkey and Iran to me. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and to slay many. So, war. Right? I'm just trying to lay the track for connecting the dots of wars, because that's what all people seem to care about. So I can tell you what wars are coming and why. And he shall pitch his royal tent in a plain between the sea and the mountain, and he shall guard the holy place, and the time of his end shall come, and none shall help him. So it just shows he's going to die in battle, basically, out there pitched in his tent, whatever that means, guarding the holy place, because he just took Jerusalem. Right? I mean, doesn't that make sense? Am I making any sense? Okay. He just took Jerusalem. So that to me is the third confirmation of a war on Jerusalem. So when's that coming? And then the 12th chapter opens, and at that time. What time? You mean the time his tent's pitched, this war, this time when he's got power over Egypt and the Libyans and Ethiopians are his allies. And at that time shall Michael arise, the great angel who is charge over your people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never been like it since the beginning of the world. And at that very time some of your people shall be delivered. Everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. Some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting contempt. So there's something to watch for. You can have somebody take over Egypt, all the treasures of Egypt, and be either have taken over Jerusalem or be positioned to take over Israel and Jerusalem. The world will be facing a time of trouble like never before, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. So, we've been talking about that for years. The sign to the Jews that Jesus is the Messiah is that dead will come out of the ground like they did in the time of Jesus at the Feast of First Fruits. It's the only time it could really happen, and make any sense. And they will warn for 40 days to fulfill the sign of Jonah that Jesus promised those Pharisees. You only get one sign, the sign of Jonah. Jonah warned Nineveh for 40 days, and it resulted in the saving of Nineveh. So these guys are going to warn the Jews, and that's going to result in the saving of this remnant of the nation that otherwise would be slaughtered, is the way I see all that playing out. But the rest of the 12th chapter now, the angels give them this is why this part's important. I heard the man clothed in costly array, verse 7, who stood above the waters of the river. He held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, swore by him who lives forever, ever, that it shall be for a time, times, and half a time. And when holy people are delivered, all these things shall be fulfilled. And I, Daniel, heard something, but I did not understand. Then I said, O my Lord, what shall come after these things? And he said, Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. So here again, it's not only the time of the end, but this time, and half a time, which has been repeated now, which has been interpreted quite legitimately, it seems, as 3.5 years. A time, 1 year, times 2 years, half a time, half a year, 3.5 years, which fits with this middle of the 7-year covenant that this king is going to break. And so I don't want to get so far ahead, but this is the last of it here in Daniel, if you can stick with me. And then he hears something. What could that something be except about the millennial kingdom? That the Messiah is going to come, save the whole nation, set them up on the mountain. They're going to be in charge with love and righteousness for 1,000 years to restore the world. I heard something, but I did not understand. Then I said, Oh my Lord, what shall come after these things? Hey, wait, I heard something. What's coming after this end here? See? Because that's what he's been seeing. And this vision told him, Go your way. Now, the last part of it's also, I find interesting, because it speaks again of the end. Many shall be chosen and made white and tried, but the sinners shall continue to sin, and none of the wicked shall understand, but those who have done good works shall understand. Interesting. The meek, maybe, that inherit the earth. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be abolished, and the abomination is given to destruction, there shall be 1,290 days. Just about 3.5 years. Blessed is he who waits and reaches the 1,335 days. I've never seen anything that makes sense to me on that interpretation. But as for you, O Daniel, go your way and rest till the end. Then you shall arise at your appointed time at the end of the days. So it's just interesting that here, and from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be abolished. because we just read back in Daniel 9, and the holy city shall be destroyed with the coming king, and the end thereof shall be a mass exile, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 7 weeks and half of 7 weeks. Then he shall cause the sacrifice and gift offerings to cease, and upon the horns of the altar the abomination of desolation. So it's kind of confirmed there. He in the timing of the 70 weeks, he talks about this coming king, in which the holy city is going to be destroyed, confirms the covenant with many. What could the covenant be except to rebuild the temple? Not a covenant, not a peace covenant with the Palestinians, not a peace covenant for land in Jordan for the refugees. The covenant. The covenant being the one that lets them rebuild their temple, because that's what it refers to. And then halfway through, I mean, why else would that be the reference? He shall confirm the covenant with many for 7 weeks and half of 7 weeks. Then he shall cause the sacrifice and gift offerings to cease, and upon the horns of the altar the abomination of desolation. Right? So he causes the rebuilding of the temple, and then halfway through. So that timetable's always been the most reliable in prophecy. If people out there want to know where this whole 7-year, 3.5 year, I mean, that's where it comes from. How else are you going to interpret that? And then over here, and from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be abolished, and the abomination is given to destruction, there shall be 1,290 days. It's like the countdown given to Moses. Man's days should be 120 years. Then that's it. The flood's coming, killing you all in 120 years. So build the ark or die with the rest of them. And so anyway, so that's, the things that I found out of Daniel. And now the one last thing that's pertinent to our discussion of where we're going in the world is Daniel 6, that opens with the lamb that opens the first seal. And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. So I'm starting to see this now as the white horse, as the Muslims have always translated this very same scripture, is a righteous king. It represents a righteous king. Even when they talk about Jesus later in Revelation, he's on a white horse. So he's looking like that. He's a righteous king. But he's not a priest. He's carrying a bow. He's a warrior king. But he's not given a crown from his warrior feet. He's given a crown of honor. That's why these 3 symbols are all there like that. He's a righteous king. He's a warrior, not a priest. He's not a pacifist. Like Jesus isn't carrying a bow. The sword comes out of his mouth. It's the truth. This guy's got a bow. This is a white horse with a bow, a righteous warrior. And he's given a crown. And we know that crown he's given is of honor, not of one won in battle. And he goes forth, conquering and to conquer. Okay, so now look at our world and imagine that what's coming is that this ISIS force, in the manner of William Guy Harvey's picture, that the Israelis and the Islamic world had to be fomented to the point of destroying each other. And also that all the citizens of the world had to be so upset that they were ready to commit all resources. And what does he say? Remember, we read in that letter, exhausted financially, economically, spiritually, just exhausted from the fight. That the citizenry of the world is ready to settle this issue however it has to be settled. This scourge, as it's called in this letter. So now, then you fit that in with Quigley's vision of a certain group of people that have the power and the desire to run the world, and can. So, and then all the scripture that we've been talking about, where through Daniel's eyes, what we're waiting for is a false king of the Jews, a king that's a little horn, meaning a small, less significant kingdom that comes up later, because the 10 horns, this third horn comes up among them and causes 3 to be uprooted, plucked up by the roots. Now, this horn becomes what I was talking about today from the 8th chapter, mighty but not by his own power. Okay, so now look at where we are today with ISIS being raised up, which is clearly a wag the dog, CIA. I mean, it's not real. So what could it be? What is real? Why'd they need ISIS? Why'd they need this war over there that we're supposedly fighting? Who are we dropping bombs if we're dropping any? What militaries are doing what? Well, now look at it in the light of what we're talking about here. This white king that has to come up and rule all the way down to Egypt, right? What does the Hashemite king want for 100 years now? His territory back. What's his territory? Iraq and Syria is what he was promised, what that family was promised for helping defeat the Ottomans. So now imagine that that's the play that's still going on, that the players that have been around for the last 100 years are still talking about that. And why wouldn't you be? If my grandfather, was promised all of the west coast of California, wouldn't I still be screaming about it today? So now imagine that's what's going on. Well, the fight that needs to be had then is against all the people that have been there for 100 years that are going to object to giving it to him and his rulership, aren't they? Isn't somebody going to say, well, wait a minute, no, my family grew up here. This is all mine. We planted all these gardens. This is my land. You're not giving it to no Hashemite king to redistribute to who he wants, and especially if you're a Shia. Okay, so now I've tried to tie in before what Sheikh Imran Hossein sees from Islamic eschatology as Sunni-Shia civil war coming. So I want to play that in today because I say that we have several wars still coming. And they're being fought right now, but they're not what we think they are. The war on Syria is I think more a fabrication to create the need to do what they're doing, which is to kill all the people that are going to object to this new Sunni caliphate that they're going to be given now after 100 years that they've been waiting for it. That's why Iraq has been carved up the way it has into these territories. And that's why the conquering that he's going to go forth doing is to be able to expand that territory into the moderate Sunni caliphate that's friends with Israel, friends with the West, lets Israel rebuild their temple. Okay, that's the crown. There's only 2 crowns, the way I see it, Dad, that the prophecy could be speaking of, that are given in honor. One is the crown of being the caliph. The Sunnis want you. We're giving you the crown to rule us because we believe you're the righteous ruler. Or the crown of being the Messiah. Right? So one or the other has to be the crown that we're talking about here because that's the only thing that fits all of the evidence that's going on. And now with that crown, he goes forth conquering and to conquer. Now that could mean conquering Israel's enemies, which are the Shia, which are the people that are going to come against his caliph. Especially when he says, now I want Iran, or I've got my eye on Iran because I've taken Egypt, right? And I've taken over that portion of Syria they've given me. I think that's what's going on right now with this war on ISIS. Is they're just like it started all the way back in 2001, a year after they made this deal, where 3 said, well, hell no, we're not giving Libya to him. We're not giving Iraq to him. We're not giving Syria to him. So now we got 9/11 and a war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we got an Arab Spring, we got bye-bye Egypt, then we got Gaddafi the terrorist, bye-bye Libya. As we say, Ethiopia's been under the fire since, they've been trying to kill any remnants of the real people left from the Orthodox Jewish tradition in Ethiopia, probably for, 50 years, 60 years since World War II. And so this is what I see now as the war. This is ISIS. ISIS is our name for our group of people over there redefining the borders. That's the war, it's given to us as this war with ISIS, but that gives us the right now to send guns all over, to bring in bombs all over that whole territory, to literally be on a war anywhere we need to be in a war over there. But what is that war really doing? Because I'm telling you, it's so obvious, Dad, there's no ISIS. It's a picture again this week. I don't even hardly want to spend the time. I'll go through some of the headlines, but it's the same thing this week. Just a few pictures of guys standing behind, 5 guys standing behind a wall shooting a gun. Could be target practice. I mean, there's just nothing going on over there that would make me think that there's these battles between these so radically inflamed Muslims that they're pissing off the whole world, and they're so determined that they're taking over, they're fighting to the death against even their own people over there to turn that place into their their caliphate. So it's it's unbelievable, and I realize it's because it's not going on, but something's going on. What's going on? Well, look at it in this bigger picture I'm trying to say, that they know they're going to have a war over there, Islam against Israel. Daniel says that this king is eventually going to take Israel. Many are going to be slain, sudden destruction. It says that there's going to be this 7-year covenant. We know it's got to allow them to rebuild the temple, because it's not till 3.5 years that he stops the sacrifice. But they're not sacrificing now, but they're ready to rebuild the temple for several years now, ever since the 2000 meeting. All of a sudden they got a website. They're ready. They got the heifers. They got the priest trained. So is that all just coincidence? That I say it all fits into this bigger picture that I'm seeing. So what you got to have is this. The war for Syria is simply the war that's going to carve out the territory that's to be given to this Sunni caliph before he goes forth conquering and to conquer. He's got to do the rest of it. He's mighty, but not by his own power. They give him a crown, and we give him the weapons. The world backs him up. Why? Because of this scourge that everybody has to fight, and it can't just be wiped out overnight. He's got to fight it on the front lines for all the people that don't want his moderate new Sunni caliphate. But after they've shown us this ISIS caliphate, the world's going to be screaming for that and want to support him. So now he has the power to go forth conquering and to conquer all these places they can present as they don't want. They want to be radical still. There's all these Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra and ISIS affiliates still at work in Egypt. So he goes down and takes Egypt. That kind of thing is what I see coming. So that's the war in Syria. Is it's going to keep going on for the territory that he needs to take over to start his caliphate. And they're backing those Shias up is what they're doing. That's why, if you look in the news today or this week, Dad, what you got is a couple of things now about, Baghdad protests. Baghdad protests against Turkey reveals Iraqi divisions. And another one this week says, thousands of Iraqis in Baghdad, Basra protest Turkish deployment in north. And when you read it, you find out it's all these Shia divisions. I mean, all these Shia groups that are getting together now. Geez, well, doesn't that fit the way I'm laying it out? Yeah, because this ISIS terrorist group that we're funding, that's the front for the idea that we're funding this group to fight it. Who are they fighting? All these Shia strongholds, all these places that have to go back to this new Sunni caliphate. Some of them are obviously under Shia control, with Shia people living there, and they don't want to give them up. Somebody's got to go in there and kill these guys. Apparently we got Turkey, and we know they're working for their piece of the pie coming in the end. That's why tidings out of the north disturb them, because Turkey's been promised something, and they're ready to fight him. Iran and Turkey finally are ready to come at him from the east and north because they see the writing on the wall. So I see that this is all part of what Sheikh Imran also sees with the Shia-Sunni civil wars, that once you give this guy the caliphate and he's being backed by these pro-Western, so obvious that he's a client caliphate, just the same way it's so obvious ISIS is a CIA front caliphate in name, but no, there's, I could say, show me any real Muslim, show me anybody, show me anything that makes it look like the Muslim world. This is their expression that they're choosing right now.
They don't want to show any of it because it's them killing Muslims, you see. Yes, they are killing Christians also that are there, but the people that are getting killed are Muslims.
Well, yeah, it's of course, Dad, you're right. That's why we're not seeing bombs and stuff, because we're killing all these Shia Muslims and Sunnis, the few that there might be that don't want to go along with the new regime. And so, but I'm saying, so when you look at the Shias of Iran and such that consider themselves, completely hostile to this world run by the Western interests, of course, they're not going to go for this client caliphate that then they're going to be told. And remember, this is all, if we're to believe William Guy Carr and Cardinal Rodriguez and Albert Pike wrote a letter to Mazzini outlining these three world wars at the end of the 19th century. Coincidentally enough, just at the very same time, all these Masonry lodges started forming, and these World War I issues started, coming about. These associations with the different figures that would become prominent in World War I and all that. So yeah, if that's just all a coincidence, the point seems to be that what it said was agents of the Illuminati would foment the war in such a way that Israel and Islamic world would mutually annihilate each other. So imagine this then now, Dad. You've given them all these weapons to be the caliph of the Sunnis. The Shias can't stand it, and since you're deeply running their, from a very deep point of view, you're running where they go. You're not the people. The people are nuts, and that's why you've got to have people over them that appear to be fighting the West. But the truth is, we've had our hands in there since the late 50s, so they happen to do what we tell them to do, I think. I think the strings for Russia, China, Iran, they're all pulled by the same people, because there is nobody else that's been funding this stuff for 100 years. Show me who else ever got behind their funding. Show me who else ever got deeper than the Vatican to start to raise up the Ottomans to kill the Orthodox Christians and fight for that territory they had promised Russia for all those years, and then raise up the Russians and the English and Hashemites to go kill all the Ottomans to get rid of that 500-year-old empire so they could get on the road to where they're going today. Show me where China and Russia ever found money outside of their money and were ever infiltrated by anybody else. The money still goes back to the same group of people that run the world and always has for at least the last 500 years. So
I said, where did all that money ever go that's come down through history? Did it just disappear?
Not the power. The power is what I'm trying to say. So if they killed the Tsars in Russia and put their people in place 100 years ago, if they led the revolution with General Mao and enslaved that whole spiritual nation into becoming, industrial slaves that work for $1 a day, if they were able to take over all the resources of South and Central America, all these things that we know are where their money went, the drug trade through Indochina, the poppies of fields and the heroin of Afghanistan, come on. So really, they lost it after the Shah and Khomeini, the first Khomeini who they put in there, the Ayatollah. You're telling me, he wasn't our man. He came to, anyway. I say the strings are being pulled, and they're being pulled for this bigger reason from the Carroll Quigley perspective and the Albert Pike, Cardinal Rodriguez, William Guy Carr perspective, and that is they already said they were going to have this war and who it was going to be fought. That's why you got nuclear weapons in the tiny area of Israel enough to start destroying. You got so many weapons there to destroy these Arabs as this war starts, when there's enough of them to eventually take Jerusalem. That's why their Quran says, there's a verse that says there'll come a time when the stones and trees will say, there's a Jew hiding behind me, come and kill him. It's at that time when they've been watching their whole world be bombed by this Western power. And now they're ready to wipe them all out, and try to. But a remnant are saved in this this exodus again, this exile, as they leave that area, is the way I'm seeing it, Dad. So now you've got all these pieces in place now, except I still feel the pot has to boil longer. It can't just be done with a couple of false flag events like Paris or San Bernardino or any of these mercenaries they send in to shoot up a place and then cover the story by throwing down some dead body and saying, the perpetrator was shot in the act of escaping. I mean, has there really been any proof of that? It's easy enough for me to imagine these mercenaries going in and shooting up. They got nobody, they got defenseless people shooting up the place, blowing up bombs. You never see any footage of any of it. And then being told that the perpetrator blew themselves up or was shot dead. I mean, never anyone to question. You'd think at some point, with terrorism facing the world, you might want to shoot them in the leg one time and bring them in for torture. And let's find out how they're, let's get one up on these terrorists while they're terrorizing the world. But no, our technology can't even slow them down. So anyway, so I see what's happening, Dad, is that this good king rises up to fight this terrible scourge called ISIS once all the people can't take it anymore. And so that has to keep building until all the people can't take it anymore. Meanwhile, this war in Syria is to keep redefining the borders. So the war on ISIS is really the war in the Middle East. It's the cover story for the war that all these different troops, like the Turkish troops and even Russia, they're all being told what targets to bomb. And they're all doing that to rise up this white horse king that everybody's going to support. That's why he's going to be so mighty, but not by his own power. But the whole world's behind him to go wipe out ISIS, is what we have to be told pretty soon. So it has to get to that pitch. And then once he has that, the Iranians and the Shias have to be so against it, because again, they see the writing on the wall, same way Gaddafi did, same way Syria did, same way Iraq did. Well, wait a minute, you're talking about my territory, you're talking about all my people. I mean, we can't go for that. So the Shias have to be so, displaced, and there already is war, so that has to push them to the final point where now they're ready to go to war against this Sunni caliphate. That's, how that comes down, whether that's after the March on Jerusalem or before the March on Jerusalem. And then that can bring in, I say it has to be after the March on Jerusalem, that he takes Jerusalem as part of all this force that he has at the midpoint of the 3.5 years. That's when things get so bad. The first 3.5 years, they're rebuilding the temple, and the world's talking about how this guy's the real one we have to support over there. Because they can keep this ISIS thing going all the way up to the very end to give a reason to keep funding it, see? The crown he has to earn and go conquering and to conquer has to be after he's defeated ISIS. Well, that hasn't even started yet.
No, they're trying to build to that right now, because I see the frenzy in the West through these false flag events that are, people die, unfortunately, because they're absolutely real, but they're false flags. They're to drive us deeper into fear.
Well, and the commitment for war, see, because remember,
that's what makes us commit to.
And then back to the prediction of the 3 world wars. It's not just to get Israel and Islam to annihilate each other. It's to bring the other thesis, antithesis into confrontation, the Christians and the atheists, basically, to bring them finally into utter conflagration and destroy them, leaving the world now ready to be managed. Whether you believe their version be managed by bringing Lucifer out into the open, or whether you believe Quigley's idea, which would jibe with the modern idea of depopulation, so that they can start over with complete control of the resources and make the world their golden age that they're after on that physical level. Either way, the world events are playing into it in such a way that this ISIS is being established as a scourge. Guns and weapons and military over there killing someone, and I agree with you, they're killing Muslims, and that's why Muslims are running from it to other countries, and they don't want people to see this. And that's going to pave the way for this white horse king to go take over the territory that they've been wanting for that they were promised and have been asking for, and have been, if you look at all the signs, have been posturing for. The flag in Aqaba declaring that he's the righteous leader of Islam, that he's been against terrorism and radical Islam from the start. That's not the way. But look at how many years has he been preaching that? How many years have we watched this rise? So that's why I say we're still in the phase of the war in Syria and the war on ISIS, which is to say in real language, the war for territory over there in Iraq and Syria that's going to belong to this Hashemite king again. And the war on ISIS is the scourge put out into the world, these false flag events that have to keep happening in the name of ISIS to keep the world wanting to be over there at war. So that
you can see how the media is pushing that right
well, because
now.
This is the thing though, Dad, because France and England and America, our boys and girls aren't going to go over there and fight for Egypt and Syria and fight against these Shias. You're going to do it, Abdullah, leading the Sunnis. It's the Sunnis that are, but they're not ready for that yet. See, they have to build to that.
They're already talking about
that. Because they're putting into our minds and the realization that it has to be a Muslim army that's legitimate in the people's eyes, so we can support him in doing it. So anyway, that's the first thing I expect to see coming, is the support of the King of Jordan to start fighting ISIS, but concurrent with that, I think more of these false flags have to happen to keep making the public of the world, the citizens of the world, more and more outraged and ready to commit whatever resources. It's got to start taxing our economies more and such to fit in with the perspective of what this third world war that was predicted. It's going to exhaust all of our resources to the point where we have to fight it. That's why everybody's going to be so happy and settle for this. In other words, once the word comes out that he's a state-run caliphate, just like Saudi Arabia has been all these years, and how can the rest of the Muslims accept that? See, that's too big a issue right now to just shove down anyone's throat. You have to build to where the world demands it, right? That way the world's ready to supply him with the guns to go forth, conquering and to conquer. Because the rest of that world's going to keep saying no. The Shias and the people who don't want to be under client state rule are going to keep fighting. And that's probably a long battle. That's why it takes all these years to get to the point where they can make that covenant and let the Jews start rebuilding the temple. I say that has to come after he goes out and starts fighting for ISIS, right? Then
And that's why the Jews are legitimate in their understanding of who they can pick as their Messiah.
Exactly.
Save them.
That's right. He has to save them. He has to defend them. So once he defends them from their enemies and makes the covenant with them to rebuild their temple, that's when they can claim him as Messiah. And it may not even be till that midpoint that they claim him that's the moment that he betrays them. You know what I'm saying? It may not be the way we always saw it, the crown of honor, as I said, could be the caliphate crown that he's given to go conquer that region. And it could very well be that that's why it's that last 3.5.
The crown represents authority, so it could also be the authority given to him to go, here's the guns, here's the money, go fight.
A crown is a crown. To me, that has to either be the Caliph crown or the Messiah crown. And it makes more sense to me as I think about it that it's the Caliph crown, because the Messiah, crowning him Messiah is what brings on the wrath. And that is that last 1260 years. That's the part from the time he stops the sacrifice. So when they make him the Messiah, he can legally do that and set up an abomination. We're going to worship this instead. So I'm looking for it possibly being that, he's not made the Messiah of them until the midpoint of that 7-year covenant, which is why I still say we should expect to see all these things happen. Him be, the one that takes on ISIS now, or that we support to take on ISIS. Him coming up with the 7-year covenant that's going to allow the Jews to rebuild the temple. These are the things we're going to be able to be preaching against, and it might not be until that last moment on some first fruits when they're going to name him Messiah that the dead come out of the dust and mourn for 40 days. That you name him Messiah, that's it. You got the worst time in history coming at you, right? That makes more sense to me to fit with all the scripture. So I see that we got to have the war in Syria has to continue until they accomplish what their goal is, which is to get whatever territory. That's why they're talking political solutions now. Anything to just keep it going, because they got people to kill, right? It'll end when the people are done being killed, and then we can show the good king go out and make his move, whatever that's going to be, some gallant effort, which I think is going to be, let's share the Temple Mount. I just don't know how he can do that till he's defeated ISIS. This is the part to watch, I think. How is that all going to work? How's the king of Jordan going to go from right now being the guy we want to support with logistics and be our go-between over there, to the guy who's really the one that's going to rise to be the caliph and is going to make the 7-year covenant with Israel to rebuild the temple. So meanwhile, you're going to have war with Syria, you're going to have false flag events, which is what we call the war on ISIS, as we're sending more and more weapons to go kill all the people over there that this caliph has to, the territory he's got to take over. Then you have to have the Sunni Shia civil war with the Shias that aren't going to be able to stand that finally now he's been given the power over all that territory. And so they have to war, and that gets them killing each other. And then you have to have the war on Jerusalem that's prophesied by both the Quran and the Daniel, that he has to take over Jerusalem and the remnant flee from there to be saved. And then you can have your World War III. See, that's why we're still years of this away. We have a lot to watch to get to that point where, that we even see, if we ever see that midpoint of the tribulation. I say we're certainly going to see the lead up now. The war on ISIS, the war on Syria.
That's what all of this prelude that we started talking about 30 years ago is what we're seeing. Only it took a long time to get to the absolute visibility of it in its performance to an end that is on the horizon.
Yeah, well, it's almost like washing mud away from a statue, a little bit at a time until the details just keep coming out. And now, I feel like it's becoming more obvious to me, if I had to bet, reconciling all the evidence, there's no other story that really fits. None of the right questions are asked. If they could sell us 9/11, then they're not afraid to sell us a war on ISIS that doesn't exist. They're not afraid to cover up the fact that we're over there slaughtering people to make room for this deal we've made. And that deal is probably to take that army and go kill the Shias. Take out Iran, and you can have Iran too. I'm not sure. And his double cross is coming and taking out Israel, if that's not all been part of some deeper deal, because in the version by Guy Harvey that might go back as far as Albert Pike, you've got the fact that these people in charge would be fomenting the Israel-Islam conflict to the point of mutual destruction. So,
well, down to a remnant anyway.
well, that's the remnant God claims. When we went through the Bible study just not long ago, God said if I didn't increase the number, there wouldn't even be a remnant, right? But for the sake of the elect, because that's the kind of slaughter that's going to come suddenly, right? For some reason, either their weapons aren't going to work, or they're going to run out of, it's like when there's just too many people sacking the hill. You can only kill so many until they finally get there. And when they get there and they've looked back at the field of blood that you've left, they're going to kill all of you. And I mean, a time of trouble like never in the world. Nostradamus with his earthquakes. Come on, this is what we're coming to, and we're in the beginning of that now. I still say that it's a very interesting time to watch how fast do we accelerate through this period of war with Syria, war with Iraq, to get to the Sunni Civil War, to get to the Jerusalem War, to get to World War III.
Yeah, well, we're at that point in Matthew where he says this is only the beginning of sorrows. And now we have started. We're into those sorrows, I believe.
Well, I think, I see Matthew a little different, because he's in my scripture here, this Eastern text, it says, not to worry about these events, earthquakes and famines in diverse places. These things are, this is always going on. This isn't the end. The end is when you're handed over to be persecuted for my name. So what could that be except the whole world loves this guy. He's let the Jews rebuild their temple. They're either already calling him Messiah or they're about to. And there's some group of people who've seen people come out of the dust of the earth, according to Daniel, at this time of the worst trouble that's ever been seen. People are going to come out of the dust of the earth, and a certain amount are going to be saved, those whose names are written in the book, which, as I say, I think that's a book of these Jews that even though they've been misled for 2,000 years, they're going to claim Jesus. They're going to be the remnant that knows, wait a minute, he's the Messiah, the remnant that was cut off all the way from that first church. That's what if you want to get to a deeper spiritual war, what's the spirit of false Messiah been trying to do but kill that voice of who the real Messiah is. That's why in John it could say anyone who denies Jesus is the Messiah, that's the Antichrist, because that's going to become the issue in the future. Who is the Messiah? And the Jews have already written him off to the point where they're officially, Jesus is a blaspheming bastard. He's not even in the running anymore as a possible Messiah. So what about when this group rises up and says, wait a minute, we've gotten a word from the dead. Our old rabbi had a vision. Jesus is the Messiah. What kind of rift is that going to cause for them in this world that's now suddenly in love with this guy who's going to seek to change laws and seasons, it says, right? This understander of riddles who the Quran says is going to find things in their going to find implements of their temple. He's going to unearth them and bring them back to the temple and reason with the Jews and turn some of them to being Muslim. So all of this fits so well to this, halfway through this agreement, he causes the sacrifice to cease and sets up an abomination, right? Who could do that but Messiah? He didn't come in there with his guns to do it. They claim he's the Messiah, and he says, okay, as Messiah, no more of this sacrifice. We're going to worship this universal God now. We all worship the same God, a God his fathers knew not. His fathers worshipped Allah, right? But he's going to worship a God even his fathers didn't know. So anyway, Dad, that's how I think we've brought the dots back up into the forefront this week.
Well, that connects the dots of what wars have to be fought just to get to the Third World War. And a very interesting trip. I hope you folks all enjoyed it. Don't forget the frankincense offerings that keep this ministry going, and you participating keeps you involved. So until we see you again next week, for Tony, I'm Brother Sal. We want you to have a great day in Christ.